What if Robb Stark executed Roose Bolton before the Red Wedding? What if a single sealed letter, intercepted on a wet road by a scout who barely understood what he carried, could have unmade the greatest betrayal in the history of the Seven Kingdoms? What if the war for the North turned not on a battlefield, but in the quiet cold of a godswood, on the doubt planted in a young king's mind before the trap could ever close around him? Consider the moment as it stands. Robb Stark has lost Winterfell. He has been told, falsely, that his brothers are dead, their small bodies burned and hung above the gates by a boy he does not yet know to fear. The grief sits in him like a stone dropped into still water, spreading outward in rings he cannot control. He is a king, and he is barely more than a boy himself, and the two facts war within him constantly. He wins battles, he loses the peace, and now, standing beneath the great heart tree at River Run with a letter in his hand, he feels the first cold breath of a truth he cannot yet name. The letter came from a Frey rider. That alone should tell him something. The twins and the North are bound now only by resentment, held together by a marriage debt Robb has broken, and by nothing else. The parchment is water-stained, the seal cracked in transit, and the words within are maddeningly incomplete. A phrase here about arrangements, a reference there to understandings between the Lord of the Dreadfort and the Lord of the Crossing. Nothing that names a plot outright, everything that suggests one. He reads it 3 times. He does not understand it. He understands enough. Catelyn Stark finds him there, among the red leaves and the silence, and she knows the look on his face before he speaks. She has worn it herself. It is the look of someone who has begun to suspect that the ground beneath his feet is not stone but ice. "You do not trust him," she says. "It is not a question." Should I? And here, the mother becomes the strategist, because grief has taught her to be nothing else. She tells him what she has watched and weighed for months. She tells him of the Green Fork, where Roose Bolton commanded, where the loyal bannermen of the North bled into the mud in their thousands, while the Dreadfort's own men emerged intact, their losses precise, their retreat orderly. A defeat, yes, but a survivable one, for those Roose chose to preserve. She tells him of the letters. Roose writes north to his bastard son, to Ramsay Snow, and those letters he does not share. Every other lord opens his correspondence at council, spreads his news upon the table for the king to weigh. Roose keeps his own counsel. Roose keeps his own everything. "He has been gathering the infantry to himself," she says, slowly, reasonably. Each command he takes makes sense on its own. Together, they make him the most powerful man in this army, save you. Robb turns the letter in his hands. The wax flakes away beneath his thumb. He is thinking of Jane Westerling now, and he hates that he is. The marriage that undid him, the oath to Walder Frey he swore and broke, a boy's honor trading one vow for another and calling it love. He knows what it cost him. He knows the twins remember it in a way that does not forgive. And if the Freys nurse that grievance, and if the Freys are writing to the Dreadfort, then the picture assembling itself in the cold air of the godswood is one he cannot afford to look away from. "You think he means to betray me?" "I think," Catelyn says carefully, "that you do not know, and that a king who does not know his own bannerman has already lost. Do not let this rot in you, Robb. Suspicion left unspoken becomes paralysis. Summon him. Look him in the eye. Ask him plainly, and watch how he answers. This is the pivot. This is the hinge on which every future turns. Because Robb Stark, in this moment, makes a decision he has not made before. In the history that will not be told, he trusts. He rides to the twins with a broken king's hope of reconciliation, and he walks into a hall where the music will change and the doors will bar, and the men he counted as brothers will draw their blades. In that history, doubt arrives too late, or never arrives at all. But here, tonight, beneath the weeping face carved into the heart tree, the doubt arrives on time. A king who cannot read his own men will not survive this war, Robb says, and the words are not spoken to his mother, they are spoken to himself. A verdict passed on his own past softness. He has been kind, he has been honorable, he has been, in the cold accounting of power, a fool, and he resolves, standing there, to be a fool no longer. He calls for a rider. Word is, to go to Roose Bolton, that the king in the north requires his presence, at first light, in the hall, alone, save for those the king permits. Not a summons of accusation, a summons of business, ordinary and unremarkable, the kind a lord answers without alarm. And then Robb gives a second instruction, quieter, meant for fewer ears. Grey Wind is to be brought to the hall before dawn. The direwolf knows things men conceal. The direwolf smells fear beneath courtesy, deceit beneath a bowed head. Robb has seen it before, the way the beast's hackles rise at a lie. If Roose Bolton means treachery, there is one judge in Riverrun who cannot be deceived by careful words. Robb folds the letter and does not burn it. The morning comes gray and quiet, the way mornings do in the Riverlands when the mist rises off the tumblestone and settles over the walls like a held breath. Roose Bolton enters the hall of Riverrun at first light, and he enters as a man who has nothing to fear. This is the first thing worth understanding about him. He does not stride. He does not hesitate. He walks with the unhurried economy of a man who has calculated the cost of every step long before he takes it, and finds all of them acceptable. His voice, when he offers his king a courtesy, is soft, so soft that men must lean toward him to hear, and this softness is itself a weapon, for it forces the room to bend its attention to him rather than the reverse. Robb watches him from the high seat and asks his questions plainly. There have been letters, riders coming and going from the Dreadfort's contingent, correspondence sent by ways that did not pass through the king's hand. Roose does not deny the letters. Denial would be a lie, and Roose Bolton does not lie when the truth will serve him better. He negotiates, he says, only for the North's advantage. He speaks of provisioning, of the disposition of the Frey host, of the necessity that a lord of experience keep certain channels open in a war of shifting loyalties. Every word is reasonable. Every word is true, in the narrow and lawyerly sense in which true things can be arranged to conceal a larger falsehood. And Robb, listening, feels the old softness pulling at him, the instinct to accept, to trust, to believe that the man before him is only what he claims. Then Robb sets the letter upon the table between them. The Frey seal is broken. The wax lies in flakes across the parchment. And in that moment, the calculation changes, because Roose Bolton did not know this letter had been intercepted, and a man's face, however disciplined, must recalibrate when the board shifts beneath him. His eyes move to the parchment. They move quickly, and then they still, and the stillness is more damning than any flush or flinch could be. For a single heartbeat, the Leech Lord is doing arithmetic no honest man would need to do. He is measuring what the letter says against what he has already admitted, searching for the seam where his two stories fail to meet. And Grey Wind rises. The direwolf has lain by the king's seat since before the mist lifted, patient as stone. Now he unfolds to his full height, and the hackles along his spine lift like a field of blades, and from his throat comes a sound that is not quite a growl and not quite a word, but something older than both, a judgment rendered in the language of beasts. He does not settle. Robb speaks his name, and the wolf does not settle. This is the second thing worth understanding. Grey Wind has stood before liars and thieves and cowards in this hall, and merely watched them. He does not rise for small deceits. He rises now. Roose Bolton looks at the wolf, and for the length of a single breath, the mask slips. Not far. A man watching from the far end of the hall would see nothing, but Robb, close, watching, sees the mouth tighten, sees the pale eyes go flat as pond ice, sees the thing beneath the courtesy show itself for one unguarded instant before the smoothness returns. It is enough. It is more than enough. And then Roose makes his mistake, because even the most careful men, when pressed and watched by a creature that cannot be charmed, will reach for arguments they should never let escape. He speaks of the Westerling marriage. He speaks of it with the particularity of a man who knows its terms, the dowry, the slighted alliance it discarded, the precise nature of Walder Frey's grievance, and how deeply it cuts. These are things Roose Bolton should not know in such detail. These are the private wounds of the twins, the tender arithmetic of a spurned old man's pride, and no lord learns them save by speaking with the Freys directly, at length, in confidence. The words leave his mouth and hang in the air, and Robb, watching his wolf snarl and understanding at last what the wolf has been telling him, arrives at certainty. Bolton has been treating with Walder Frey, and behind Frey, or beside him, stands the golden hand of Tywin Lannister, two masters, and neither of them the boy on the high seat. If you're enjoying this alternate history of Westeros so far, please consider subscribing. I upload new stories every single day. Now, let's continue with the story. Roose reads the room the way he reads everything, and he rises to leave. He must return to his troops, he says. There are matters of supply. His voice is calm, his movement unhurried. A man withdrawing from an audience concluded. But Robb speaks first, and Robb's voice is no longer the voice of a boy who wishes to be liked. He orders the great John Umber and Magie Mormont to seize Lord Bolton where he stands. The hall breaks. Bolton men along the wall reach for steel, hands closing on hilts, and steel answers steel as the Karstark guards and the Mormont spears step inward, closing the space. And for one terrible suspended moment, Riverrun's ancient hall balances on the edge of slaughter within its own walls. The Great John's great hand falls upon Roose Bolton's shoulder, and Roose does not struggle. He stands very still amid the drawn blades, pale eyes moving from face to face, already counting, already measuring, already asking himself the only question that has ever mattered to him. What now? What now indeed? It is the question that hangs over the hall long after the blades have been lowered, long after Roose Bolton has been led away to a chamber where two Umbers stand watch at the door. The moment of violence has passed without blood, but something else has begun, something slower and heavier, and it will not pass so easily. Catelyn finds her son alone in the solar as the torches gutter low. She has seen that look upon a man before. It sat upon Ned's face in the days before he did a thing he did not wish to do. She recognizes it in the boy, and it frightens her more than the drawn steel had. She speaks carefully. "A great lord cannot be killed upon suspicion," she tells him. "The letters are damning, yes, but letters can be forged, and men who wish to believe a thing will read guilt into ink where another man reads only ambition. Half the northern host marches beneath the flayed man, or beside it. Kill Roose Bolton without proof they cannot argue with, and you do not remove one enemy, you make a dozen. The lords who followed him will ask themselves a simple question. If the king in the north can behead a great lord on the strength of intercepted words, whose words are safe? Whose head is safe?" She lays it out the way a woman lays out a map, calmly, so that he might see the whole of the ground and not merely the piece before him. Robb hears every word. He does not dismiss her. He weighs it, and the weighing is visible in the set of his jaw. But he has done his own counting, and the arithmetic is grim. He has read the letters. He has heard Bolton's own voice speak of two masters, and neither of them the boy on the high seat. He knows, with the near certainty that is the closest thing a commander is ever granted to knowledge, that the man in that chamber intends his ruin. And he knows what that ruin will cost. Not one death, thousands. The whole of the north bleeding out on a floor of fray rushes while Tywin Lannister smiles in his distant tower. Against that, the fracturing of the host is a lesser wound, a survivable wound. He does not say this cruelly. He says it as a boy who has learned too fast that a crown is a weight, not a gift. And then he remembers his father. The words come to him whole, the way they always do, spoken in that grave and gentle voice on a cold morning years gone by. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. If you would take a man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. Ned Stark had meant it as a lesson in the burden of judgment, a way to keep a man honest against the temptation to kill from a comfortable distance. Robb understands now that it was also a lesson in resolve. To wait, to hesitate, to let the trap close and hope for mercy that will not come, is not caution. It is cowardice wearing caution's cloak. He will not wait for the walls to fall around him. He convenes his bannermen at once, in the gray hour before the hall can grow crowded with rumor. He does not plead. He presents. The letters are laid upon the table, and he reads them aloud in a steady voice, and he repeats Bolton's own words spoken not a day before. Then he names the thing plainly: high treason against the king in the north. The Great John is on his feet before the last word settles, roaring assent that shakes the rafters, his fist upon the board. But not all rise with him. There are lords who study the table and say nothing, and their silence is its own kind of speech. One murmurs of the precedent: a Stark bannerman, killed upon suspicion. Today it is Bolton. Tomorrow it may be any man in this room. Robb hears the murmur. He marks the faces. He knows precisely what he is buying and what he may be spending to buy it. Dawn comes cold and clean over the tumblestone, mist rising off the water like breath. Roose Bolton is brought down to the riverbank, and he walks without protest, unbound in his dignity, pale eyes taking in the assembled host the way a merchant takes inventory of a room he is leaving for the last time. He is offered the chance to speak. He says only that the king is younger than he is wise, and that wisdom, in the end, is the only currency the North will spend. It is not quite a confession and not quite a denial. It is Roose to the last, giving nothing, keeping everything behind that flat gray gaze. Robb takes ice's weight in both hands. He does not delegate the stroke. His father taught him better. Roose Bolton kneels, and the great Valyrian blade comes down once, clean, and the thing is done, and the head of the Lord of the Dreadfort falls upon the wet stones of the shore. In the hush that follows, Robb declares the Dreadfort forfeit to the crown and its heir, the bastard called Ramsay Snow, attainted and outlawed from this day. The words carry across the silent camp, and in that silence Robb Stark stands with his father's sword bright and terrible in his hands, and he knows he has purchased either his salvation or a war within his own ranks, and he does not yet know which, and the not knowing is a colder thing than the morning air. What happens to a man who has just lost everything and never had anything to lose? This is the question that will decide the fate of the North, though no one at Robb's camp can yet answer it, because the man in question is many days' ride away, standing before the broken gates of Winterfell with a besieging army at his back, and no lord left in the world to command him. The news reaches Ramsay Snow, the way all terrible news travels in the North, carried by a rider whose horse is half dead and whose face is gray with cold. The words are simple. His father is executed. His inheritance is attainted. He is landless, nameless, and outlawed in the same breath. And Ramsay listens, and Ramsay smiles, and the smile is the worst thing the rider has ever seen, because a leashed dog obeys its master out of fear of the master. Remove the master, and the fear does not vanish. It simply loses its object. It becomes something else. It becomes hunger. Consider what Roose Bolton had always been to his son: a break, a cold hand upon a hot instrument. The father restrained the son not from mercy but from calculation, because a bastard's cruelties, if unchecked, invite the attention of kings, and Roose lived his entire careful life avoiding the attention of kings. Now that hand is gone. The calculation is gone. What remains is only the instrument, and the instrument was never designed for anything but ruin. He does not march to save Winterfell. There is nothing in Winterfell worth saving to him now. He turns instead upon the very castle he was sent to reclaim, and he takes it not as a liberator, but as a locust. The Ironborn who held it are already broken, already few, and Ramsay's men fall upon them, and then upon the halls themselves. Fire climbs the ancient stone. The godswood chokes on smoke. The great keep where Starks were born and died for 8,000 years burns against a white winter sky, and the men who watch it burn do not know they are watching the death of a symbol so much as the birth of one. Theon Greyjoy's remaining men are put to the sword, not in battle, in the aftermath. Ramsay does not fight what he can simply slaughter, and slaughter is a language he speaks with fluency. And when it is finished, when the walls are blackened, and the towers are hollow, and the snow itself has turned gray with ash, he rides north, toward the Dreadfort, toward the one seat in the world that might, by force and terror, still be made his own. An attainted man cannot inherit, but a fortress does not read decrees. A fortress obeys whoever holds its gates. Now trace the line backward from the consequence to the man who must prevent it. Robb Stark, hundreds of miles south, does not yet know his home is ash, but he knows Ramsay, or knows enough. He understands the arithmetic of a hostile keep behind his own lines, and the arithmetic is brutal in its simplicity. A war fought against the South cannot be won if the North is bleeding at his back. The Dreadfort is old and strong, and if a desperate man reaches it first and bars its doors, it becomes not a castle, but an abscess, a thing that festers and spreads, and demands a siege the king in the north cannot afford to mount, while Lannisters wait beyond the neck. So Robb does what a king must do. He divides a force he can scarcely spare. Robert Glover takes the command, and the Hornwood levies march beneath him, men who have their own reasons to hate the name Bolton, for it was a Bolton bastard who once took Hornwood lands by chain and starvation. Robb gives them a single instruction, and it is not complicated. Take the Dreadfort before the bastard does. Hold it for the crown, and if Ramsay Snow reaches it first, take it anyway. The march is a misery. Winter has arrived, not as a poet's flourish, but as a physical fact, and the roads north are choked with the first hard snows, snows that do not melt, snows that pile against the wind and swallow the pace of a column whole. Horses labor, wagons sink. Men who were farmers a season ago learn what it means to march through weather that wants them dead. And every day the column loses to the snow is a day Ramsay gains, and both Glover and the men who follow him understand this, and the understanding rides with them like a 13th month of the year. Back at the camp on the shore where ice fell, word of Winterfell begins to arrive in fragments, and fragments are crueler than certainty. A burned castle, Ironborn dead, a bastard's banner seen upon the road. Robb hears these things assembled and reassembled, and each version wounds him differently, and none of them tell him what he most needs to know, which is whether his brothers, already believed dead, died again in the burning, or were only ever a rumor of death made real by fire. He grieves for a home he cannot see and cannot bury. And grief, in a king, does not soften. It hardens. It compresses into something with edges. He resolves that the war must end swiftly now, that the North must be reclaimed entire, that no more of his blood will be spent in the slow bleeding of a divided realm. He does not yet know that the swiftness he demands of the world is precisely the thing the world is preparing to deny him. He only knows that Robert Glover is marching, and that somewhere ahead through the falling snow, a bastard is marching faster. What if a plan requires two hands to strangle a king, and one of those hands is severed before the trap can close? This is the question Walder Frey turns over in the cold rooms of the twins, though he does not phrase it so plainly, for old men who have survived 9 decades do not phrase dangerous things plainly, even to themselves. He phrases it as arithmetic. Roose Bolton was to hold the northern host from within, to know its dispositions, to open its throat at the appointed moment, while Frey crossbows sang from the galleries. That was the design. That was the thing agreed in whispers with Tywin Lannister's men, sealed with the promise of a Bolton marriage and a warden's cloak. And now the man who was to be the knife lies quartered on the road, his head a lump of frozen meat upon a spike, and the plan Walder Frey purchased at such cost is worth precisely nothing. He learns of it from a rider, and the rider does not finish speaking before Walder understands the full weight of what has changed. He does not need the rest. He waves the man silent, with a hand spotted like a toad's back, and sits very still in his high seat, calculating. Consider the position from behind those gray walls. A betrayal only works if it is a surprise. A surprise only works if the betrayer is not suspected. And Roose Bolton's execution means one of two things, both of them poison. Either the boy king killed his lord for the ordinary treasons of an ambitious man, or the boy king killed him because he had learned of the conspiracy itself. Walder cannot know which. This is the terror of it. He sits in the twins, wondering whether Robb Stark now holds, somewhere in a captured saddlebag, a letter in a certain hand that names a certain crossing where a certain slaughter was to be arranged. He wonders if the young wolf is already coming for him. And so he does what frightened old lords do. He withdraws. He raises the drawbridges of his mind before he raises the ones of stone. When Robb's envoys arrive, they find the gates shut and the Lord of the Crossing unavailable, indisposed, too aged and unwell to receive. Robb reads the refusal as what it is. A man who bars his door has something behind it. But Robb also reads the map, and the map is merciless. He needs the crossing. He needs the Frey swords, 4,000 of them. The difference between a war he might win and a war he cannot. He cannot storm the twins. He has neither the time nor the men to spend on stone. So he sends the two people in the world most likely to pry an old man's door ajar. He sends his mother, who brokered the first bargain and carries its broken pieces in her hands, and he sends the Blackfish, who has never in his life feared a wall. They ride to the twins under a gray banner, Catelyn Stark and Sir Brynden Tully, and they are admitted where lesser envoys were not, because Walder Frey is curious, and curiosity in the old is a kind of hunger. He receives them at last in his hall, propped and blanketed, ringed by sons and grandsons, whose faces he cannot always distinguish anymore. And the negotiation that follows is not a warm thing. It is two frightened parties pretending not to be frightened, each measuring the other's knowledge. Catelyn offers the apology first, and offers it publicly, which is the coin that matters. The king in the north regrets the broken betrothal. To mend it, he sends her brother, Edmure Tully, Lord of Riverrun, to wed a daughter of House Frey, whichever the old lord should choose. It is a better match than the boy could ever have offered. A lord for a daughter, not a mere king's word. Walder's watery eyes narrow at this, because he understands that a good offer made under strain is itself a message. The Starks want the crossing very badly. Wanting a thing badly is a weakness. But then the Blackfish speaks, and his words are not soft. He tells Walder plainly what became of the last man who thought to sell the wolves back to the lion. He describes the spike. He describes the head. He does not say that Robb suspects the twins of anything, and he does not need to. He lets the silence do the work, and Walder Frey, who has traded in silences for 60 years, hears in it the thing that decides him. For here is the calculation that turns the lock. The Red Wedding was never Walder's plot to spring alone. It was Roose Bolton's to detonate from inside the host, and Roose Bolton is dead. Without a traitor commanding northern men, the slaughter cannot be stitched. Frey crossbows in the gallery would kill 100 and buy nothing but the certain destruction of his house. There is no profit in it now. There is only risk, and Walder Frey has never in his long, spiteful life spent gold on risk without profit. So he takes the colder bargain. He takes the lord for his daughter and the apology for his pride, and he grants the crossing, because a live grudge outlives a dead one. Trust is not restored. Trust is a corpse between them, and both parties know it. When the Frey columns march north at last, they march with Stark captains riding close upon their flanks, watching every banner, counting every sword, and Robb's men do not sleep with their backs to Frey fires. What if the war against Roose Bolton did not end with his head, but with his son. For a traitor, Lord may fall in a single stroke, yet the poison he bred does not drain from the world so cleanly. It has a name, it wears a bastard's cloak, and it waits behind the black walls of the Dreadfort, where the moat is deep, and the gates are barred, and the man within has never once believed that the world owes him mercy, because he has never once offered it. Robert Glover's column comes north along the old Flint Road, and what it finds is a fortress that expected them. Ramsay Snow has drawn his cruel loyalists tight around him, the sort of men who follow only where blood is promised, and he has taken hostages from the countryside to hang his safety upon their throats. He does not fear a siege. He courts one. For a man who owns nothing but a name half-legitimized understands that a siege is a stage, and he means to perform. So he comes to the wall to parley, and he does not come to bargain. He comes to break them. The calculation is simple, and it is savage. Terror is a weapon that costs nothing and buys much, and Ramsay has spent his whole life learning its price. He brings a prisoner up onto the rampart where every Northman below can see, and he begins the slow art his house once carried on its banner, before Robb tore that banner down. The screaming carries across the frozen ground. The lords beneath grip their reins until the leather bites their palms. This is meant to sap them. This is meant to make them wonder what waits for any man who climbs those walls and fails to reach the top. It does the opposite. That is the flaw in terror as a strategy against men who already hate you. Fear works upon the uncertain. It does not work upon the resolved. Every flayed inch of that dying prisoner does not weaken the northern will. It welds it. Robert Glover watches without turning away, and something in his face settles into a shape that will not soften. And when Ramsay finishes his performance and calls down some jest to the men he has just tried to unnerve, no one laughs and no one flinches, and the silence that answers him is colder than any threat. He has taught them, without meaning to, exactly what will happen if he is not stopped. He has made his own destruction necessary in their eyes. Then the Manderley host arrives. Wylis Manderley brings his father's strength up from White Harbor, and with it come the engines, the trebuchets and the rams and the towers of green wood that a fat lord of a wealthy port can afford when leaner houses cannot. Now the balance shifts. Now the Dreadfort is not a wall to be stared at, but a problem to be solved by weight and stone. And with the Manderleys comes word from Robb himself, carried by a rider who has not slept. Ramsay is to be taken alive if it can be managed. Alive so that he may answer for the burning of Winterfell, for the murders done at Hornwood, where the Bolton bastard had already shown the North what he was long before this war began. Robb wants no clean death for this one. He wants the truth spoken aloud, where the northern lords can hear it. Because a king who has executed one lord for treason must be seen to have cause, and the cause must be shown, not merely claimed. The assault does not come through the front, it comes through betrayal, as such things often do. One of Ramsay's own men, a frightened creature who has watched his master flay a stranger, and understood at last that his own turn was only a matter of time, opens a sallyport in the dark. That is the true weakness of terror as a foundation. It binds men through fear alone, and fear is a rope that frays the moment a man believes he is already doomed. Loyalty purchased with dread has no reserve to draw upon in the final hour. The port swings wide, the Northmen pour through in the black cold, and the fighting in the yards is brutal and short. torchlight swinging across walls that have drunk more blood than any castle in the north. They take him alive. It is not gentle, and there is a moment when Glover's men might easily have made it a killing, but they hold, because Robb commanded it, and because they want him to answer more than they want him dead quickly. Ramsay Snow is dragged into the great hall of his father's seat, and there the reckoning is unbottled. The dungeons are opened. The kennels are searched. What the northern lords find in the depths of the Dreadfort is laid bare before them all. Atrocity upon atrocity. The workings of a mind that took joy where other men take horror. And among the horrors is the matter of Theon Greyjoy, and the matter of Winterfell's folk, and the slow understanding of what was truly done in that burning hall, of who lit it, and who profited, and what became of the small people whose only crime was to have served a Stark. The lords stand in that cold hall and look upon it, and something passes between them without words. They came here to end a bastard. They leave understanding they have uncovered a wound far older and far deeper, one that stretches back to the father Robb has already killed, and forward to a truth that has not yet been spoken. What does a king do with a monster who does not fear him? This is the question Robb Stark carries into the great hall of the Dreadfort, and it is a question with fewer answers than one might suppose. He could imprison him. He could ransom him, though no one would pay. He could send him to the wall, where the Night's Watch takes murderers gladly and asks no questions of their souls. Each of these is a road, and each road, if followed to its end, leads somewhere Robb has already decided he will not go. They bring the bastard forward in chains, and the chains are the only thing about him that suggests defeat. Ramsay Snow does not walk like a condemned man. He walks like a guest who has arrived early and finds the host unprepared. His pale eyes move across the assembled bannermen, cataloging them, weighing them, and there is something in that gaze that makes hardened men look away. He is smiling. He is always smiling. It is the smile of a creature who has learned that other men's discomfort is a kind of currency, and he spends it freely now, because it is the only coin he has left. The trial, if it can be called that, is brief. The charges are read aloud in the cold air of that hall, and they accumulate like snowfall, each one heavier than the last. The burning of Winterfell, the flaying of captives whose bones were found in the dungeons below, the murder of the Ironborn who had surrendered, and the murder of the Northmen who had not, the impersonation of loyalty while his father schemed toward betrayal. The lords listen, and their faces harden, and Robb watches their faces, because a king must always be reading the room he stands in. Ramsay is invited to answer. He does not defend himself. He does something far more dangerous. He boasts. He speaks of the men he flayed as though describing a favorite meal, lingering on details, watching for the moment each lord flinches so he can savor it. He names the folk of Winterfell he killed and burned in Theon's name, and he laughs at the cleverness of it, the way a lesser man might laugh at a joke only he understands. He taunts the Greatjon. He taunts the Glovers. He tells them all, with the confidence of a man who has never once been made to fear consequence, that they are soft, that the North was strong only when men like his father held it, that flaying is not cruelty, but honesty made visible. He is trying to provoke them. Robb understands this. A quick death in fury, a blade drawn in outrage. This is what Ramsay wants, because it would be the last small victory available to him, the proof that he could make even a king dance to his tune. So Robb does not give it to him. He lets the bastard talk. He lets the silence stretch after every vile word, until the boasting begins to sound less like defiance and more like the barking of something chained, and the lords who nearly drew steel now only stare, and the room turns cold in a way that has nothing to do with the northern air. When Robb finally speaks, his voice is level. He does not raise it. He tells the hall what he has decided, and he frames it not as vengeance, but as arithmetic. House Bolton has poisoned the North for generations. The father schemed toward the murder of his king. The son burned the ancestral seat of the Starks and made sport of the innocent. There is no branch of this tree that can be pruned and saved. There is only the tree and the axe and the understanding that some lines must end so that others may endure. He will not send this creature to the wall to whet his cruelty upon the realm's last defenders. He will not ransom him to no one. He will not let him rot in a cell, alive and legend-making, a name for future rebels to rally behind. He sentences Ramsay Snow to death, and then, because the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, he rises to carry it out himself. There is a courtyard, and there is snow, and there is ice. The great Valyrian blade of his father, though not the true ice, for that has been lost, but the sword he bears in its place, and it is enough. Ramsay is forced to his knees. Even now he tries to speak, tries to fashion one last barb sharp enough to draw blood from the memory of the men watching. But Robb does not let him finish. He does not need him to. The blade falls once, clean, and the last of House Bolton ends in the courtyard of the seat that House Bolton built, and the flayed man banner comes down from the walls that same hour, never to rise again. The Dreadfort's lands Robb claims for the crown, to be held until stewards can be found whose loyalty is beyond the reach of doubt. He will not gift such a stronghold to any lord who might one day be tempted to become what the Boltons were. And in the days that follow, something shifts among the northern host. The wavering lords who feared a faction poised to bleed them, who wondered privately whether the young king could master the wolves at his own table, wonder no longer. They rally. Their numbers are fewer than the doomed host that marched south in another telling of these events. But the men who remain are men Robb can trust with his back turned, and he is beginning, at last, to understand what that is worth. What is an army worth when its king cannot sleep for fear of the men who share his tent? What is a victory worth when it plants the seed of a defeat no sword can parry? Robb Stark has spent these questions without ever knowing he was spending them, and now, freed of a debt he never signed his name to, he sits with the Blackfish over a map worn soft at the folds, and begins, for the first time, to think like a man who intends to win. The Blackfish is blunt, as he has always been. The Western raids were a wound Robb inflicted upon himself, he says, victories that carried the host farther from the north with every mile, that stretched supply lines until they snapped, that won ground no man could hold once the winning was done. Brilliant on the field, ruinous on the map. And Robb, who once measured himself by the battles he had not lost, nods slowly, because he sees it now. He sees the whole shape of it, a young wolf who never loses a battle and never wins a war, marching in circles across a kingdom that bleeds him a little more with each glorious triumph. So he stops. He gathers the raiding parties. He calls them back from the golden hills and the burning granaries and the river crossings deep in Lannister country, and he consolidates. The word tastes strange in his mouth, unheroic, unworthy of the songs. But songs do not feed men through a winter. and Brynden Tully has never once mistaken a song for a strategy. Hold the fords. Hold the crossings of the Trident and the Red Fork and the Blue. Let the Riverlands become a wall the Lannisters must break themselves against, and let the North sit behind that wall, whole, intact, unbled. Starve the Western supply lines rather than chase the men who guard them. Make Tywin Lannister spend gold and grain and marching seasons to gain nothing, and wait, patience, the one weapon Robb Stark has never held in his hand. Far to the south, in a solar high above the city he has just saved, Tywin Lannister receives a letter that does not burn as easily as he would like. He reads it twice. He is not a man who reads things twice. The Bolton arrangement has collapsed. The Frey bargain, so carefully constructed, so elegant in its treachery, has come to nothing. The young wolf lives. His army lives. And the flayed man that was to have been Tywin's dagger in the dark has been unmade before it could ever be drawn. He sets the letter down. He does not raise his voice, because Tywin Lannister does not raise his voice. But the hand that rests upon the table is very still, and stillness in that hand is its own kind of thunder. The Blackwater is won. Stannis is broken and scattered. The throne is secure, and all of it, every hard-bought coin of it, must now be spent again, because the enemy he had crossed off his ledger has picked himself up off the floor and is standing, quietly, at the western door. He must divert. He must peel men away from the flush of triumph, men who thought the war all but ended, and send them west and north to shore up a border he had told himself was already dying of its own poison. He had wagered on treachery, and treachery had failed him, and Tywin Lannister does not like to be reminded that some men cannot be bought, because it means his map has a corner he cannot see into. The young wolf has become something worse than dangerous. He has become predictable in the way that patient men are predictable, which is to say, not predictable at all, only certain. Tywin summons his maester. There will be letters. There are always letters. But Robb has been thinking about letters too, and about doors, and about the enemy no one else at his table wishes to speak of, the Ironborn, Balon Greyjoy, who has taken the North's undefended coast, while the North looked south, who holds Moat Cailin and Deepwood Motte, and the memory of the Stark boys he did not truly conquer. The lords in Robb's tent want vengeance. They want to turn the whole host north and drown the Krakens in their own harbors. And Robb, who once might have listened, does not, because vengeance is a raid, and he is done with raids. He sends emissaries instead, not to threaten Balon Greyjoy, but to tempt him, to lay before that grasping, salt-hungry old man a simple truth dressed as an offer. The North is a poor prize for the Ironborn, all stone and pine, and long marches inland, where their ships cannot follow, and every mile they hold is a mile that must be paid for in blood. But the West, the gold of Casterly Rock, the fat, undefended coast of the Lannisters, the ports and the granaries, and the wealth that Tywin has stripped of its defenders to fight 3 wars at once. There is the prize worth a Kraken's ambition. Turn outward, the offer says without saying it. Turn your longships against the men who have never once feared you, and let the wolf and the Kraken keep, for a season, the peace of 2 beasts who have found a fatter throat to open. It is a gamble. Balon Greyjoy is proud and old and half mad with the memory of a crown. He may spit on the offer. He may take the coast and hold it out of pure spite. But the ships have sailed, and the words are loose upon the water. And somewhere on a wet gray island, the answer is already being written. The answer, when it comes, is written not by Balon Greyjoy at all, but by the sea that made him. What if the god a man prays to is the very thing that kills him? On a night of black wind and driving rain, on a rope bridge slung between two towers of pike, Balon Greyjoy falls. The storm takes him, as it has taken so many Ironborn before, indifferent to crowns and grudges alike. He goes into the water that he loved, and the water does not care that he was a king. And in the moment of his falling, the whole calculus of the war shifts, though no man in the Riverlands yet knows it. Consider what a death does to a house that has no clear heir. Balon's brothers scatter to their ambitions. Euron returns from exile with salt in his beard and murder in his eye. Victarion nurses his own claim. Asha, the daughter, raises her banner among the men who love her, and there is no living son to bind them, for Theon serves the wolf now, a hostage turned uneasy sword, far from the islands, and further still from any throne. The Ironborn do what they always do when a king dies without an obvious successor. They call a kingsmoot. They quarrel. They sail home to argue over who shall wear the driftwood crown, and in sailing home, they leave their conquests thin. This is the gap in the board that Robb Stark has been waiting for. He does not celebrate, he acts. The northern coast, held by Ironborn garrisons that suddenly find themselves leaderless and unpaid and uncertain whether the men who put them there still live, becomes a string of doors left ajar. Robb sends word north to the mountain clans, to the men of the rills and the stony shore, to every graybeard and green boy who stayed behind when the host marched south. Retake what is yours. Strike while the Kraken looks inward. And they do. Deepwood Motte, held now by a garrison arguing over which uncle to obey, changes hands in a single gray dawn. The coastal keeps fall one by one, not to great armies but to determined locals who know the land and know that the invaders' hearts are no longer in it. And Moat Cailin, the ancient ruin that plugs the neck like a stone in a throat, the fortress that had sealed the north away and cut Robb from his own lands, that too is loosened by Balon's death. The Ironborn who held it were always few, always isolated, always dependent on a will that now lies at the bottom of the sea. Robb does not need to storm it with fire and ladders and mountains of the dead. He needs only to make its garrison understand that no relief is coming, that no king remains to reward their loyalty, that the war they were fighting has ended for their masters and left them stranded in a swamp that eats men. Some yield for gold, some yield for passage home. The neck is reclaimed, and with it, for the first time in a long and bloody season, Robb Stark can look north and see nothing but his own. His flank is secure, his homeland is whole, and now, at last, he can ask the question that a king at war must eventually answer. Not how do I win the next battle, but what am I fighting for? He calls his lords to Riverrun to decide it. Picture the great hall, the Tully trout carved above the high seat, the northern banners and the river lord's sigils, crowding the walls like a congress of beasts. The Great John rises first, because the Great John always rises first, and his voice fills the vaulted stone like a war horn. Independence, he thunders, not accommodation, not a bent knee wrapped in pretty words, but a free north and a free trident, a king of their own choosing, sundered forever from the throne that murdered Ned Stark. Mage Mormont stands with him, blunt and iron-hard, and says the same in fewer words. The Tullys urge the opposite. Edmure, and behind him the ghost of the caution the Tullys have always carried, argues that the Iron Throne is weakened but not dead, that Tywin Lannister is old and his heirs are poison, and that a wise king takes what peace he can wring from a bleeding enemy rather than gambling the whole realm on total victory. Robb listens. He weighs them as a man weighs stones in either hand, and then he speaks the truth that none of them wish to hear entire. He will keep his crown. He is king in the north and the Trident, and that will not change, for too much blood has been spilled to unmake it now. But the war cannot be won by marching on King's Landing. The South is too vast, too rich, too populous, and every mile his host advances into it is a mile stretched thinner from home. Conquest is a road that ends in exhaustion, so he sets a different aim: defensive independence. Hold the neck, hold the rivers, bleed the Lannisters at every ford and every hill, until the cost of retaking the North outweighs the pride of the crown that wants it. Make himself not a prize to be seized, but a wound that will not close, until Tywin Lannister, that most rational of monsters, does the sum and accepts a divided realm. It is a strategy of patience. It is a strategy of survival. And even as the lords murmur their assent, a rider is already spurring south from King's Landing, carrying an invitation sealed with a golden lion. What if a single life, not yet born, could reshape the calculus of a war? What if the smallest thing, a woman's changing body, a physician's quiet confirmation, could do what 1,000 swords could not, and knit a fractured cause into something whole? The word comes softly, the way such words often do, carried not by heralds or ravens, but by a maester's careful voice behind a closed door. Jane Westerling is with child, and Robb Stark, who has learned to receive every message as a soldier receives a blade, by the hilt, never the edge, finds that this one cuts him with joy instead of dread. He sits very still when he hears it. He does not shout. He does not celebrate. He calculates. Because a king who is also a husband has learned that even happiness must be measured against the board, and the board has just changed. Consider the arithmetic of it. A marriage that once threatened to unmake him, the broken word to Walder Frey, the insult carried on the wind to the twins, has produced the one thing his cause most desperately lacks: a future, an heir. For men do not bleed and die for a king alone. They bleed for what comes after him, for sons and grandsons, for a line that will remember the debt of their blood and repay it in honor. A childless king is a candle burning toward its own end. A king with an heir is a fire that promises to warm generations. And the northern lords, who had grumbled in their cups about the girl who cost them their alliance, now feel the grumbling die in their throats. What is a broken betrothal against a Stark prince in the belly of a queen? Robb understands this at once. He understands it the way a chess player understands that the pawn he sacrificed has reached the final rank and become something far greater. The Westerling marriage, which men had named his shame, has quietly become his strength. He does not say this aloud in the great hall. He says it only to his mother. Later, in the gray light of the solar, when the fire has burned low and the servants have gone. I married her because I had wronged her, he tells Catelyn. I married her because it was right. I did not think it could also be wise. He turns the goblet in his hands. And now it is both. And I do not know whether to thank the gods or fear them. Catelyn does not answer at first. She has learned that her son speaks best when he is allowed his silences. She watches the firelight move across his face and sees, beneath the crown and the beard, and the weight of 100 decisions, the boy she raised. And she thinks of the Westerlings themselves, that small, proud family who chose him over Tywin Lannister, who opened their gates and their daughter's chamber to a king in the middle of a war, and who now cannot go home. For the crag is no longer safe. The moment their treason became known, the moment Tywin Lannister understood that a family sworn to Casterly Rock had sheltered his enemy and given him a bride, their doom was sealed in the old man's ledger. Lannisters pay their debts, and Tywin's debts are always written in fire. So the Westerlings flee. They flee north under Stark banners, carrying what they can, leaving what they must. And Robb receives them not as beggars, but as bannermen who paid the highest price for loyalty. He gives them land in the reach of his crown. He gives them protection. He gives them the one currency a king can offer that is worth more than gold, he remembers. This too is calculation, though it wears the face of gratitude. A king who rewards loyalty teaches every watching lord the value of it. A king who abandons those who bled for him teaches them the opposite, and the lesson costs him dearly when next he needs a gate opened in the dark. Robb has watched men break faith. He has executed a man for it. He will not now break faith himself. The board rewards consistency, and Robb Stark has become, at last, a consistent player. But it is Catelyn who brings the second word that night, and hers is the one that turns his careful strategy sideways in an instant. A ranger has returned, a man of the north who slipped through the ruin of Winterfell and beyond, who saw what the Ironborn and the Flames had left, and who came south again with a tale that no one dared to hope was true. They may live, Catelyn says. Her voice does not tremble. She has willed it not to. Bran and Rickon, the bodies at Winterfell. There is doubt now, Robb. Real doubt. The ranger heard whispers that they were hidden, that Theon's boys were not your brothers at all. She leans forward, and the firelight catches the fierce, fragile hope in her eyes. Someone took them into the wild, someone loyal. They may be out there still, cold and hunted and alive. Robb Stark, who has spent this entire war learning to trust nothing that cannot be proven, looks at his mother across the dying fire. He wants to believe her. That is the danger of it. He wants it so badly that he does not trust the wanting. And yet the arithmetic has shifted again. For if his brothers live, then the Stark line is not the thin thread he feared, but a cord of many strands. Send searchers north, Catelyn presses. Tonight, Robb. And the word she does not finish hangs in the room, heavier than any crown. What if hope, once admitted into a heart armored against it, becomes its own kind of strategy? What if the arithmetic of survival, which had reduced House Stark to a single fragile figure standing amid the ruin of the North, suddenly acquired new variables, new possibilities, new strands to weave into a cord strong enough to bear the weight of a kingdom? Robb Stark does not answer his mother that night. He rises instead and moves to the window, and he looks out at the darkness where the searchers would ride, and he begins, quietly, methodically, to think. The searchers ride at dawn. Not many, for the North is thin of loyal men, but chosen with care. Those who know the land the way a man knows the faces of his children. Those who can pass through a hostile village without drawing the eye. Those who will not sell a whisper for silver. Robb sends word north along 100 threads, and among the hands he must clasp are hands he would rather not. The Reed's allies, the Crannog men and the Marsh folk, hold themselves apart from the Great War, suspicious of southern quarrels, wary of any lord who comes bearing promises. Robb has learned that reconciliation is not friendship. It is calculation dressed in courtesy. He offers them what they value: the freedom of their bogs, the memory of oaths sworn to his father, the shared blood of the old kings of winter. And they offer him, in return, their eyes upon the roads. The North, which had begun to slacken, to doubt, to wonder whether the young wolf still had teeth, feels something stir. Word spreads the way water spreads through peat, slowly and then everywhere at once. The Stark boys may live. The small folk who had wept over Winterfell's burning now dare to whisper that their little lords escaped the fire. Old women light candles they had not lit in a year. Men who had thought only of surviving the winter begin to think, again, of who might rule when spring comes. And in this way, the search becomes something larger than the finding of 2 children. It becomes a proof of purpose. It rekindles the emotional investment of a broken people in a cause they had half buried with their dead. Robb understands this. He counts it among his assets, even as he prays it is more than an asset. That is the burden of the crown he wears. He cannot simply want his brothers home as a brother wants them. He must want them home as a king needs them. And the 2 wantings war within him, and he lets neither win. The answer comes in pieces, as such answers always do. A trader who plied the eastern coast brings a rumor of a wildling woman and a small dark-haired boy taken to Skagos, that grim island of stone and unicorns, and men the mainlanders name cannibals. Rickon. It can only be Rickon. And separately, from a black brother sent south with letters, from a ranger who had walked the haunted forest and returned with frost still in his beard, comes word of the other. Bran Stark, they say, went beyond the wall, went north with companions into the white silence where the dead are said to walk, went somewhere no army could follow and no raven could reach. Robb reads the letters twice. He burns neither. He sits with them a long while. Bran is beyond his grasp. He accepts this with the cold precision that has kept him alive. To send men over the wall in the depths of war would be to send them to their deaths for a reunion he cannot guarantee, and Robb has spent too many lives already. Bran is safe, or Bran is lost, and either way, Bran is not a piece he can move. So he sets that piece aside, gently, the way one sets aside something one loves and cannot hold. Rickon is different. Rickon is reachable. Skagos is a hard place and a hostile one, but it is an island in a sea Robb's allies can cross, and Rickon is a Stark of Winterfell, a boy who could stand in the north should Robb himself fall in the wars to come. The logic is inescapable, and Robb follows it to its end. He must recover Rickon, not only for love, though love is there, buried beneath the calculation, like a root beneath frost. He must recover Rickon, because a king who might die in battle needs an heir the North can rally to, needs a living Stark to plant in the ruins so that the name does not die with him. He begins to draft the decrees that very night. His hand does not shake now. The crushing weight he has carried since Winterfell fell, the loneliness of the last wolf, the terrible arithmetic of a line reduced to one, lifts, and in its place comes something that is not quite joy but is close kin to it, purpose. He will rebuild Winterfell. He writes it plainly, an order to gather masons and timber and men, to raise again the walls the Ironborn burned, to make of that black ruin a statement that House Stark endures, that the North remembers, that the winter did not win. He rules less from grief now. He rules from design. And as the candle gutters and the first gray light finds the window, Robb Stark seals the order to send men to Skagos, to bring his brother home, not knowing that far to the south, at a crossing near the Twins, other men are drafting invitations of their own, and the ink is not yet dry. What if a war could be won without a final battle? What if the true victory belonged not to the commander who broke his enemy in a single terrible afternoon, but to the one who simply refused to lose, day after day after day, until the cost of the fight outstripped its purpose? This is the question that begins to haunt Tywin Lannister in the gray stone rooms of the Red Keep. And it is a question he does not like, because the arithmetic of it favors a boy. Consider the ledgers. Tywin Lannister does. He is a man who understands that gold buys spears and spears buy kingdoms, and that when the gold runs dry, the spears grow thin, and the kingdom trembles. The Blackwater burned green in the harbor, and burned coin in the treasury, and behind every mercenary and every reprovisioned host stands the patient, implacable shadow of the Iron Bank of Braavos, which does not forget its debts and does not forgive them. He sits with his accounts spread before him like the pieces of a game he has always won, and for the first time in a long time, the numbers do not resolve the way he wills them to. The fords hold. That is the maddening truth of it. Robb Stark sits astride the crossings of the Trident like a wolf guarding a threshold, and every attempt to force those waters has ended in the same red silt, the same drowned banners, the same messengers riding south with faces the color of ash. The boy does not need to advance. He needs only to remain. And remaining, it turns out, is something the young wolf does exceptionally well. The Tyrells feel it too. In the Reach, where the harvests are golden and the coffers deep, questions are being asked in solars and at feast tables, questions dressed in the silk of courtesy but sharp beneath. Why do the flowers of Highgarden bleed for a northern stalemate that yields nothing? What does Mace Tyrell gain from a war that does not end, a front that does not move, a crown grown poorer by the fortnight? Alliances are living things. They require feeding, and Tywin Lannister, who has fed alliances his whole life on the promise of victory, finds that promise thinning in his hands. Then comes the crossing at the fords, and it settles everything. A probe, they call it in the aftertellings, a joint venture of Lannister discipline and Frey ambition, a testing of the northern line at a crossing thought vulnerable. The Freys are eager. They have their own scores now, their own wounded pride. For the man they had counted on, the man who was to open the door from within, hangs dead in the memory of Riverrun, and Walder Frey nurses his humiliation like a wound that will not close. So the Freys ride hard, and the Lannister captains ride with them, and they come to the water expecting to find it thinly held. They do not. Robb Stark has been waiting. He has read the ground the way his father taught him, has salted the far bank with archers, and hidden the horse in the tree line, and let the enemy commit before the trap closes. The water runs red again. The Frey vanguard is shattered on the crossing, cut apart in the shallows, where their numbers mean nothing and their footing means everything, and the Lannister column, seeing the ruin, breaks and withdraws before it can be encircled. It is not a great battle. It does not need to be. It is a lesson, written plain in the current of the Trident, and its lesson is this: the young wolf has never lost a battle, and he does not intend to begin now. The tally reaches King's Landing. Tywin Lannister reads it in silence. He does not rage. Rage is for men who have run out of options. And Tywin has not yet, but he has run out of easy ones. He turns the report over in his hands, and he does the thing he has done all his life, the thing that has made him what he is. He calculates. A war of attrition he cannot afford, an ally whose patience thins, a treasury bleeding into Braavosi ledgers, and across the water, a boy who wins by not losing, who need do nothing but hold, and time itself becomes his sword. There is a moment, brief, and he would deny it under torture, when Tywin Lannister considers negotiation for the first time. Not surrender, never that, but terms, an arrangement, the recognition of certain realities that have become too expensive to deny. The envoys move by night. They carry no banners. They ride the narrow roads between Riverrun and the capital in plain cloaks, and what they carry in their sealed satchels is more dangerous than any army. Tywin's offer is careful, precise, weighted like everything he does. Recognition of northern autonomy, the return of prisoners, peace along the Trident, a crown of ice for a crown of gold, and each king to his own dominion. It is a generous proposal. That is exactly what troubles Robb Stark when it reaches him. He reads it twice in the light of a low candle. Grey Wind lies at his feet, unmoving, and Robb thinks of his father, and of promises, and of the way Lannister words have a habit of dissolving the moment they are no longer useful. Lannister promises are written in sand. He knows this. He has learned it in blood. And yet the offer sits before him, real and tempting and terrible, and behind it lies the one question he cannot yet answer. What does Tywin Lannister truly want? And what is he willing to burn to get it? The War Council convenes at dawn, and the men who gather in the Great Hall of Riverrun carry the weariness of years in their faces. They have won battles that will be sung of for generations. They have also buried sons and brothers, and the slow certainty that the war might ever truly end. Robb spreads Tywin's terms upon the table, and he watches how the words land. Some men lean forward, some men lean back. The Great John slams a fist against the wood and speaks of marching south, of taking the Red Keep stone by stone, of hanging Lannisters from the walls of the city they love. It is the answer of a man who has not yet counted the dead. Robb has counted them. He counts them every night. The Blackfish speaks next, quieter, and his words cut through the fury like a blade through cloth. What can they hold? He asks. And what can they truly take? The north is far. The riverlands are bled white. Winter is coming, and no army marches well into winter, and no army feeds itself on frozen fields. To take King's Landing is to overextend. To hold it is to invite 100 years of rebellion. And the throne itself, the Iron Throne, the great ugly chair of melted swords, was never what the North wanted. They rose for justice. They rose for Ned Stark's blood. They did not rise to rule the Seven Kingdoms. What if victory was never the crown in the South, but the freedom in the North? The debate runs long, it runs hot, and then it runs cold, and then it settles into the grim arithmetic that governs all wars once the passion has burned away. A negotiated independence, the North free, the Trident free, two kingdoms standing apart from the Iron Throne, sovereign and self-governed, no longer bending the knee to a boy king on a chair of blades. It is not the vengeance the Great John wants. It is something more durable than vengeance. It is a border, and a treaty, and a future in which northern sons die of old age rather than of Lannister ambition. Robb makes his choice. He does not make it quickly, and he does not make it lightly, but he makes it. He will treat with Tywin. He will trade the dream of the Southern Throne for the reality of a realm that is his own. The parley is set upon the God's Eye, that vast pale lake with its haunted island at the center, neutral ground where neither king holds the advantage. They come by boat, both parties, watched by hidden archers who will loose no arrows unless the world ends first. Tywin arrives as he always arrives, precise, unhurried, dressed in the crimson and gold of a man who has never once doubted his own worth. Robb comes in gray and white, a direwolf at his side, and the two men who have shaped the fate of a continent sit across a table beneath a sky the color of old iron. The terms are hammered out over 3 days. Each clause is a battle in miniature. The Iron Throne shall formally recognize Robb Stark as king in the north and the Riverlands, his line and his heirs after him. Hostages shall be exchanged as surety, high-born children to guarantee the peace, a currency older than gold. The crown shall cede all claim to the lands north of the Neck, and the lands watered by the Trident besides. And in return, this is the price, and Robb feels the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He renounces any march on King's Landing. He will not take the city. He will not press the war. He will let the Lannister boy keep his ugly chair, so long as the boy's shadow never falls across the Neck again. Tywin agrees to it all with the calm of a man closing a ledger. He has lost the North. He has known for some time that he was going to lose it. But he has kept the throne, and he has ended a war on 2 fronts. And he has done it without spending another Lannister soldier's life. To Tywin, this is not defeat. It is the pruning of an unprofitable branch. And then there is the final clause, the one Robb insists upon, the one he will not yield though the negotiations threaten to founder on it a dozen times. Sansa, his sister, held these long years in the gilded cage of King's Landing, a hostage to her family's rebellion. He will not seal any peace that leaves her behind. Tywin considers this. He weighs the girl's value as a hostage against the value of concluding the war, and he finds, in his cold, precise arithmetic, that a signed treaty is worth more than a frightened girl. He agrees. Sansa Stark will be released as part of the exchange. She will ride north to her brother's side under banners of truce, and the war that in another world might have ended in a hall of murdered men, in wine and betrayal and the wet ruin of butchery, ends instead in ink upon parchment, in the pressing of 2 seals, in the wary handshake of 2 kings who trust each other not at all and yet have found something they can both survive. It is not friendship. It is not even peace, precisely. It is the absence of war, which for now is enough. The parchment is sealed. The riders are dispatched north to carry the word, and south to fetch the girl. And somewhere in the Red Keep, a maester breaks a seal of his own and reads that Sansa Stark is going home. The road north is long, and Robb Stark rides it as a king who has survived what he was never meant to survive. Consider the arithmetic of it. A boy who won every battle and lost the war, in that other world, the world that was voided in a god's wood on a gray morning, when a blade found the throat of a man who was even then plotting betrayal. That world is gone now. The letters that would have summoned the Freys and Boltons to a wedding of knives were never written, because one of the 2 men who would have signed them lies buried beneath the cold northern earth, and the other never dared move without him. So Robb rides home, and the world he rides through is not the world of ruin. The gates of Winterfell rise before him rebuilt, the stone rescoured, the timbers new and pale against the ancient walls, and above the gatehouse, the direwolf banner of House Stark snaps in the northern wind, as though it had never once come down. There is a particular weight to a banner that has been lowered and raised again. It carries the memory of its own fall. The northern lords who ride at Robb's back understand this weight. They stood loyal through the long war, the Manderleys and the Mormonts and the Glovers and the Umbers, and they will be honored for it, not with grand ceremony, but with the quieter currency that the North values more, which is trust remembered and faith repaid. In the North, loyalty is not a transaction, it is a covenant. And Robb has learned, in the hard years, exactly what that covenant is worth. Beside him rides his queen. Jane Westerling came to him once as a comfort and a complication, a marriage that in another telling might have unraveled everything, that might have been the very thread whose pulling brought the whole tapestry down. Here it is otherwise. Here the marriage that could not be undone becomes instead a foundation, and Jane rides north not as a scandal, but as a wife, her hand steady on the reins, her eyes taking in the pale stone of a home that will become her own. And behind them, quiet and thin and older than her years, rides Sansa, recovered, ransomed, returned. She had been a hostage in a den of lions, a piece upon a board she never asked to play, and now she comes home along the King's Road under banners of truce, and when the gates of Winterfell close behind her, she will weep, and no one will fault her for it. There is a promise carried north as well, unspoken and yet present in every mile. Rickon is not yet home. The youngest wolf ran far, hidden in the wild places beyond the reach of any raven, and the finding of him will take time and patience, and men sent quietly to Skagos and the islands beyond. But he lives. Word has come that he lives, and a king who has learned patience in the winning of a kingdom can afford the patience to bring one small brother home. It is only a matter of time now, and time, at long last, is a thing the Starks possess. The seasons turn. Winter comes, as it always does, and the North endures it as it always has, huddled behind thick walls with fires banked high and stores laid deep. And within those walls, in the warmth of a chamber where a fire crackles against the dark, Jane bears Robb a son. Consider what that single birth undoes. In the world that was voided, the line of Ned Stark's eldest son ended in a bloody hall, extinguished, the name carried forward only by scattered survivors and the memory of the dead. Here, the line continues. Here, an heir cries out his first breath in the castle his father saved, and the succession that seemed a cruel joke of the war becomes instead a living thing, a boy with gray eyes who will grow up knowing only peace. And Catelyn, she who in another world died screaming in that same voided hall, her throat opened above the corpses of her son and her kin, lives to hold her grandson in her arms. She takes her place as the matriarch of a house that was pulled back from the very lip of extinction, and in the quiet years of peacetime, she is at last permitted the one thing war never allowed her, which is to grieve. Ned is still gone. No decision in any godswood could bring him back, but she may mourn him now openly, in a home restored, surrounded by the living, and there is a mercy in that which the war never offered. The years pass gently. King Robb rules a north that is free and healing, a kingdom that answers to no southern throne, its lords bound to him by the covenant of faith kept. And sometimes, in the still hours, he walks alone into the godswood where it began, and stands beneath the red leaves of the heart tree, and remembers. He remembers a gray morning, and a traitor's neck, and a choice that most men would have hesitated to make: to strike first, to strike down the man who plotted his ruin, before the ruin could be visited upon him. Everything that followed flowed from that single decision: the wedding that was never held, the knives that were never drawn, the wolves who lived when they were meant to die. He does not speak of it often. He does not need to. The North remembers, and the North rebuilds, and the king in the North rests at last in a peace that was purchased with one act of terrible resolve, and it is enough. And this brings us to the end of this alternate history. If you enjoyed exploring how events might have unfolded differently, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. We dive into new stories from the world of Westeros every single day, imagining the choices, battles, alliances, and destinies that could have completely changed the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. And if you'd like to explore even more stories, our Lorekeeper members unlock a brand new exclusive alternate history every single week. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What do you think would have happened next? Did this version of history end better than the original? Or would you have taken the story in a completely different direction? Leave your ideas in the comments, because many of the best future stories come directly from your suggestions. Thank you so much for watching and for spending your time with me. I'll see you tomorrow with another alternate history from Westeros. Until then, peace.